Greetings again. We now are one day off from President Trump's China visit with carrying back some questionable accomplishments. We can get into that. Watching this, uh, I have to sit down and think about how uh, Trump views his foreign policy uh, attempts. He's a sphere of influence guy. You just got to say that he looks to the dominant power in different geographical areas and decides to try to see if he can make friends with whoever that the reigning government official in that area is. For instance, um, Putin during this campaign was his good friend, his really good friend, even after he was elected. He was saying during the presidential campaign, because of his relationship with Putin, he was going to shut down the Ukraine war in a day. And that didn't happen. And then after a while, he arranged to meet Putin in Alaska, and he was broadcasting before going there that they were going to come away with a deal. And Putin did what any really smart and seasoned government leader and diplomat did. He shut him down. They had the walk along the red carpet off the planes, all of those sorts of things. And Trump got back on the plane, and Putin went off and did what he was going to do, and he's still doing it. Um, this visit with President Xi, leader Xi, in China was sort of the same thing. He showed up, he kept talking over and over again about his good friend. He's my good friend. He's my good friend. And let's just say, at best, they probably are frenemies. Uh, you know, Xi is a very smart guy. He's been doing this his entire life. He has been watching what Trump has done. He has done a lot of comments about the decay, basically, of the American society, and he's been smart. He's been smart. They haven't taken any weapons assistance, China, in situations that like Iran, which uh, Trump proposed that he do something for. So, um, and then in the Middle East, Netanyahu is his friend. And basically, I think he caved to his friend when this mammoth uh, aerial invasion of Iran took place. So that's what we are getting as Americans with the foreign policy of President Trump. And before we go into what the situation ended up being in China and other issues involving the United States and China, let's take a look back on East Asia and the rotating balances of power, let's say for the last 120 years. There has been a cycle in East Asia of different countries that come to the top for a while, and they are the big country that's going to run things for a while. It'll be the dominant country in that very, very important region. There's If you go to Northeast Asia, particularly, you have the only convergence, geographical convergence on Earth, where four major powers constantly intersect: China, Russia, Japan, and the United States. These are historic powers as we look at them. If we came out of we went into World War II with Japan having risen to the top, and they came out. We came out of that with not a great top country other than the United States as the stabilizing power, attempting to sort out all of the damage that World War II had occurred in the region. But by the time um, I was Secretary of the Navy in the 1980s, um, the Soviet Union had become the ascending power in East Asia. And there are historic markers with Russian power, always wanting to get into warm water ports in the Pacific, et cetera, et cetera. And they the Soviet Union during the time I was in the Pentagon had the largest naval fleet in East Asia. On any given day, when I was Secretary of the Navy, there were 25 Soviet combatants at Cam Ranh Bay, Vietnam, which was unusual for Vietnam, but had become basically a bit of a client state for the Soviet Union at that time. But it was unheard of in the history of Russia that they had those powers. And they were expanding. We were working very hard to contain that expansion. And as part of that, what we ended up doing it was putting more money into China, investing more money, business money, et cetera, in China, so that we could figure out a way to sort of balance this out and see what we could do with the Soviets. The Soviets did it to themselves. The Soviet Union fell apart with great reason being the way that the Reagan administration had handled the balance of power with the Soviet Union elsewhere. The Soviet Union fell apart 1990. All of a sudden, China emerged. They did a lot of business with us. American businesses couldn't wait in the 1990s to get into China and to see what they could do. So we had a situation where China was now moving forward step by step to become the dominant power in East Asia. It still exists in sort of different ways. But with that, we go to what happened. Our fleet was good there too, by the way. That was the major stabilizing factor in our relationship with the Japanese. But when the United States got all tangled up in the Middle East and was getting ready to go into Iraq, it looked very bad. The people who were doing it in the Bush administration did not think it would go looking bad, but it was looking very bad for the future. And I wrote a piece for the Washington Post like 5 months before the invasion of Iraq. And the title of it was "You Really Want to Be in Iraq for the Next 20 Years?" And I basically said it's a terrible strategic flaw for the United States to invade Iraq. And one of the major reasons that I put into that article, the Washington Post article, was that it is going to empower China and, in a sense, Iran. And it's going to empower China and slow us down in East Asia because we're going to have to drain a great deal of our military people and our money into the Middle East. We don't need that. And it's going to really have a harmful effect for us in East Asia. That happened for 20 years. The Iraq situation fell apart. And we started, I think, fairly recently to try to rebuild our military and defense structures in East Asia, Southeast Asia. China continued to expand down into the South China Sea, etc. But there we are. Here we are. We start to get our hands around something like this, and then here comes this second Trump administration deciding that we are going to really do it again in the Middle East and do it badly. And that's kind of where we are. And if anything, as we are draining all these billions of dollars into the Iran invasion. People are starting to have other views of what's going on. And so when Trump went to China, the major thing that we needed to really look at was that China has been very smart in this period, and it's not just in that region. They are becoming very smart as arbiters around the globe. They were doing it in the Middle East. They didn't say, they are the country of harmony, of getting people to talk and this is their logic, their diplomatic logic, you don't have to do these sorts of things in order to stabilize your region. Um, so here we were with uh, China having really played a very good hand in this, and President Trump came off the plane with 16 billionaires, more or less, uh, major leaders, economic leaders, and that, by the way,
Yeah.
if you look at um, the national security strategy that that the Trump administration put out in November 25, yeah, I'm sure we all remember that. Um, that was really a national economic strategy. There's
Yeah.
very
Mhm.
little, and particularly in that region.
It's a
So
business
here,
plan.
so here we
Yeah.
are. So here we are, and there are other things I'm going to say, but feel free.
Jeff, you mind if I jump in here real quick?
Please.
Okay. Been talking about this pretty much all week, nonstop. But a couple things that I mean, there's something new every morning when I wake up, something new and ridiculous. But two things I just want to focus on, and I'll pass to you, Jeff. Is one, you had the in effect business meeting that Trump was running with his friends while he ran interference. It reminded me when I was working at a large corporation about how we would do business. Like the heads meet, everybody else runs around cutting deals, right? Your VPs, your reps, they go cut deals. This had nothing to do with diplomacy whatsoever. Um, and if you peel it down a layer further, he's just making his friends, richer. He's bringing them to the table to cut deals at the highest level. It has nothing to do with the American people. But on that note, the important thing to look at, something I saw this morning, is that an head analyst over at Goldman Sachs, was saying that there appears to be like little in the way of tangible results, even from a business level on this that have come out of it. Boeing stock is already down. Webb closed 5% down. And then the biggest thing that I saw out of this was that Reuters is reporting that Chinese customs has halted the export clearances for hundreds of U.S. beef plants. And this is just hours after there were seemingly approvals. It seems just like a giant middle finger from Xi back to Trump. But that ties into the switch in rhetoric that the administration has had. Like you guys remember back 2016, literally every other word out of this guy's mouth on the campaign trail was, maligning China. They're our greatest threat. They're listed in the national security strategy as a threat. And he comes off the plane, and Dad, you know a lot about this. You're the biggest expert in Asian culture I've ever met, who's Caucasian. But he comes off the plane, and there's probably a little bit of this anticipation on the Chinese side that that the American dragon is here, like this fire breathing guy who hates our country. And he's out there, like, please, sir, may I have some more? Like he's completely lowering himself in front of the entire region. And then they turn around and stick a knife in him on the way out the door. So my baseline with that is that this is completely counterproductive on any level. Like nothing got accomplished, and
Right.
you're not going to do any kind of diplomacy in 2 days. Like,
Well,
there's no prep work, like nothing
right.
into this.
And Jeff, let me get one key point in that I see in that then turn it over to you. I look at this as two things. One is when they came off. I hate this when I see the president of the United States talk about making a deal. Okay, maybe his business people are making a deal, but presidents and secretaries of state make an agreement.
Mm-hmm.
They work toward agreements, and that word has been abandoned in this administration. And you see it all. When you look at the news on TV, they keep talking about that. But what I see here really is classic China. Classic China. What she did was he gave Trump this big welcome, and Trump comes off with all of these business leaders. We're going to make deals. We're going to make deals. We're going to make deals. And she just, for like a whole day, he just, okay, just let me show you my rose garden here, you know. Uh, and then he turns around and smacks him.
Mm-hmm.
They get him into the corner that they need, and that is Taiwan. And what they need about Taiwan is there's a $14 billion deal that we had made with the Taiwanese, to weaponize their systems, upgrade their technology, etc. And we haven't fully agreed it yet. And the Taiwanese have been sitting there. Are they going to do it? Are they going to do it? And she turns to Trump, and he says, I've tried to follow this minute by minute yesterday, last night, all the way to midnight. And she turns around and he says, we can do a lot of these things, but Taiwan, if you do something the wrong way, it's going to be very, very bad. And you don't know, we don't know what Trump is going to come out on that. But I think that was one of the ultimate goals, is to stop the United States from giving that weapons contract to Taiwan, because that would ring through the whole region. That we genuflected.
Yeah, and
sorry.
Jeff, let me get one final thing. Take me 30 seconds here, and I'll turn it over to you. But in that same context, the reference of Thucydides' trap by Z, that blew my mind. That absolutely blew my mind, because that is a completely an American thing. And it was clear as day what that signal was, and Trump didn't know what to do with it.
That's what he did. Mm-hmm. He sucked him right in. Yep. And we'll have to see. Sorry, Jeff.
Yeah. Just for I was going to raise that myself, and for our listeners, what Jim is referring to is the Peloponnesian Wars by Thucydides, which were the wars between Athens and Sparta. And Z compared China to Athens, in other words, the power on the rise, and us as the Spartans in decline. The clear message was, China's been saying this for years, that the West is in decline, but now it's clearly the Trump-led. And the incredible response of Trump was, and it was lame, and it was late, and it was terrible, was, he was talking about Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Always.
Okay.
Always.
Dream on.
Biden and Obama, they did all this, right?
Right. And I've been turning it all around. If that's true, then why did Z even bring it up? You guys are exactly right. It didn't help.
Trap.
Yeah, absolutely. It was quite the trap. And to watch Trump sitting at that gigantic rectangular table, all slumped down, looking exhausted, and just talking over and over again about how beautiful everything was, and we've been friends for so long. It was pathetic. In terms of statesmanship.
Right.
Yep. And, the three of us talk all the time about character and about leadership. It was the grossest display of non-leadership and just a complete lack of projection of power. It was embarrassing. So what a complete waste of time.
I don't necessarily disagree that we are a power in decline. I think it's pretty obvious that, things are just not going well. A lot of, and most of it's self-inflicted, but for him to waffle and then to deflect blame on the global stage, you want to talk about accelerating that. You just undermine any kind of confidence in this country. This guy's, his hallmark has been a strong, chest thumping, strong leader. That's what I am. And he's not, but that's his public portrayal of things. And for him to just say it's somebody else's fault, as opposed to no, we're awesome. Just something out there, make something up. It's you're not going to find the manager of a baseball team like the Yankees. Okay. Yankees manager, they're in first place. They lose 5 games in a row. You're a team in decline. He's not gonna be well, that's the last guy's fault. It's he's no, we have a good organization and we're working on it. That's,
to me, the comeback, and would have to be stated more diplomatically, obviously, is we're the freest country on the planet. How about you?
Absolutely. There you go.
Yeah.
Well,
How
this is
about your freedom?
How are the
Let's
Let's
see
hear
Uyghurs
what
from
he's
doing?
your
thinking
people.
now. Here's what he's thinking now. When he gets trapped, is what am I going to do?
Yeah.
Because he wants to make a deal. He wants something out of this, and he came out of it talking in total generalizations about, well, yeah, I think he did this, he did that. You never, if you're a president of the United States, you don't come out of a meeting with a leader like that who's very, very careful with his cards and try to tell Sean Hannity what he meant, what he said he would do, because the
Oh no.
Chinese haven't put the gauntlet down yet on this. And so there's one other thing here, because and I totally agree with you, Jim. We are not a declining country. We've got an administration that has not done well in foreign policy at all, and we're going to have to rebuild it. Um,
Yep.
when Jimmy Carter was president, and it wasn't on this issue, although Iran, took all the hostages or our whole embassy when the Ayatollah took over. But you know, Jimmy Carter himself was not really equipped yet to be the president. He was a one-term governor of Georgia, and it was a totally different thing, and people were writing like now, or like these our foreign friends, they're saying, oh, we're a declining civilization. There are articles I remember back then before Reagan came in saying no one person can handle the presidency anymore.
Mm.
We need three
Mm,
people to be presidents. And
mm,
Reagan came in. He'd been the governor of California, the most populous and controversial state in the country, for 8 years, and he really knew how to do it. And we came out of it. So um, but there's one other thing, but I'll wait till. Jeff? Did you want to say anything else on that?
To your point about Jimmy Carter, it's interesting. There's a parallel here. Um, Jimmy Carter unilaterally terminated a treaty between the United States and Taiwan. And Barry Goldwater was so pissed off about it that he sued.
Hmm.
The case is called Goldwater versus Carter. And it just so happens, Jim, that your law school classmate, Paul Kamenar, was Barry Goldwater's counsel in that case.
So really,
Yeah, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court. Goldwater won at the district court level. The D.C. Circuit reversed, and then they managed to get cert from the Supreme Court. And the clerk of the court calls Paul and says, I've got some good news and some bad news. The good news is we've accepted cert. The bad news is you lost at the district court level. And Paul said, well, what about at the DC Circuit level? And they said, you lost there too, because this is a political question. It's not, in other words, yeah.
which
So,
is true,
yeah,
actually.
yeah,
When you
yeah.
think about
It's
yeah.
not just, it wasn't, the Supreme Court decided it was not justiciable by an Article 3 court. And so Carter's undoing of the treaty. But the point here is that the reason he undid the treaty unilaterally was to improve relations with China. So, to your point exactly, Jim, there are these cycles, these repetitions, and I think we, the American people, really need to know where our administration comes out on Taiwan.
Yeah, I mean, the political diplomatic situation in Taiwan changed after that, because the following administrations felt a need to clarify what our obligations were, and we have all these other years we have been in a situation where we cannot like say to them, recognize them as a
Right.
country, Taiwan.
Mhm.
We probably could, but it would be very explosive.
Violates
Pun
the rules of the
intended.
game.
Like, yeah, but it is okay. We recognize what Taiwan is doing, and we take a neutral position on what happened if China move. But that neutral position has always been filled with you better not do it.
Yeah.
And if our president comes in and says now that we're not going to do that deal because we want you to do all these other things with us, and I want to bring something to your attention here, and I'm going to have to read some notes on this, but. And I read the Asia Times a lot, and 3 days ago, there was an article in there from a guy named Bob Savick, who has a book coming out on multipolarity and the changing global order, which was very, very smart. I'm not going to read this whole thing through, but there's another uh, way of looking at what the Chinese have been doing on this, and that is they really want to have the yuan be the global currency. They want to
Yeah.
take the dollar out. They want to
Yeah.
take the petrodollar out.
Absolutely.
And China has been very active in the region, and he has some. I'm just going to read 3 or 4 of these because I think they're really important. And because Jim, you used the word accelerating. The U.S.-Israel war on Iran has acted not as a mere diversion, but as a brutal accelerator of history, uh, fundamentally rupturing the Middle East security architecture and accelerating the very realignment it sought to prevent, meaning we sought to prevent.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
the outlook for China has shifted from a distant possibility to a near-term imperative, with the petro-yuan emerging as a viable successor to the petrodollar, and Iran and Russia play pivotal, albeit contrasting, roles in this new order. And the theme in his article is I won't read the whole thing, but it's extraordinarily good piece. Um, he basically says, Iran has benefited by now and in the future of the Russians providing military aid because they don't have the money to help rebuild all the stuff that's getting knocked down, and China coming in as the good guy and really helping rebuild all these buildings that have been knocked down and actually becoming the valued political monitor, overseer,
Right.
political
Right.
country replacing us.
Yeah, it's a
Wow.
couple other things that accent that piece that happened that really didn't get reported back here was one, BRICS held a meeting concurrently while Trump was in China, and Iran was there, and the Saudis came up with a it's not a security architecture, it's a non-aggression pact. I mean, if you go back to the Ribbentrop Pact, that didn't really work very well, but it's at least something. It's a start in the right direction. So they were meeting behind the scenes, and like the Saudis, supposedly our ally, big air quotes, in the region, were spearheading efforts that would make the Chinese look good on behalf of the Iranians. But then in the middle of these negotiations, and granted, this is Iranian state media, so you take it with a big grain of salt. We're saying that upwards of 30 oil tankers that were Chinese were released from the Strait of Hormuz directly into our blockade, heading to China.
Right.
While Trump was sitting there with Xi. And I don't have any reason to doubt it because I don't have any information saying that we intercepted anything. That's you have CENTCOM saying that over the course of the whole blockade, they've intercepted 70 ships and damaged 4 more. But I would assume that that number would be a lot higher if they were intercepting these ships, and it would be in tradition with American foreign policy that if somebody was trying to pull a fast one on us in the middle of a big meeting like this, that we would publicize that as a show of strength. Like say, hey, you're trying to do this to us right now? Nope, you're not doing that. But
Well,
that's a big signal.
here's you look at this article. He points this
Mhm.
out, because he says that with Saudi Arabia now selling 4 times as much oil to China as to the U.S.,
Mhm.
the logic of settling these massive transactions in dollars is increasingly tenuous. And
Yeah.
he also pointed out that the Iranians allowed the Chinese ships to go back. That he didn't give a number on it,
Mhm.
but he said that they were there and into the future, they would, if the tolls were being taken, they would be taken in yuan, not dollars. So there's a sort of an underlying theme here
Mhm.
about what the Chinese want to do, and I think probably maybe our economic people are following that. I don't have any evidence of that. So
Well,
uh,
in terms
the
of
Gulf
Trump,
the Gulf will turn to China for economic security, but may rely on Russia for counter hegemonic with political voice and arms diversification. There we are. Okay, I'm done with that article, but it's a good one.
excellent. Uh, Maybe we should chat for just a minute on the repercussions of the deal, the ultimate deal Trump is trying to cut with China, which is $1 trillion in investments, which would be the single greatest uh, sovereign investment of any country in the history of the United States. Uh, what's Of course, what's also right up there is the $600 million that Saudi Arabia pledged to invest back in May of last year. So I guess right now they've got the big number. But I want to ask you both, what are the repercussions of that kind of foreign investment by two cultures? And I hearken back just to a second to the national security strategy
Mhm.
of November of 2025. One of the credos is flexible realism. U.S. policy will be realistic about what is possible and desirable to seek in its dealings with other nations. We seek good relations and peaceful commercial relations with the nations of the world. Now, here's the key, the money quote of the world, without imposing on them democratic or other social
Yet
changes.
Gosh.
that
Okay,
is
so
so
much for
true.
American exceptionalism.
That is so true.
Who
You know,
cares?
he wants
As
to
long as we get
he
the
wants
money.
to he wants to have the big boss as his friends. Putin is his friend. Xi is his friend. Netanyahu is his big friend. Twist his arm friend. But they don't look at the other diplomatic and political issues that are involved.
Yeah, I mean, go back to
Absolutely.
the we seek peaceful relations part. We just bombed a country in the middle of negotiations. Like, and that country has been the center of commerce going back several millennia. Like, you could have
Yep.
a peaceful relationship with them based on trade if you wanted it, and we clearly don't. But the other part that I key in on that is like, I'm old enough to remember when the word decoupling was really popular, particularly in, you know, context of the
Mhm.
Chinese.
Mhm.
And for us to flip on a dime like that makes us look weak, in my opinion. Makes us look
Oh, it would
incredibly weak.
absolutely. It would go through the region, East Asia, like a lightning bolt.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Absolutely.
the other piece of that when we were talking about what the Chinese may be offering or with whether they're making a deal, he came out of there, and I'm looking at this. I'm saying a president who's been in a one-on-one situation, a private meeting, comes out and talks to Sean Hannity about, well, he's this, he's that, he's really tall. I mean, he could be in a movie.
He's so
And by
good
the
looking.
way,
I'd love to hold his hand.
I just invented a new nickname for the Democratic Party. Do you want to hear it? Really? He said that to Sean Hannity last night. Um, but but I think they're going to do it. Sean Hannity says, "You think they're going to?" Well, I think he said he really wanted to do. They really wanted to do the Strait of Hormuz. Well, of course he does, but I'm not sure he's. The next morning, the Chinese foreign ministry said, "Yeah, but we don't believe you should have gone in." I mean, they're not going along with us. But the other part of that is, they're going. We're waiting for the Chinese to make their decision. I remember when I was taking companies into Vietnam in the '90s, and it's sort of that uh, way in East Asia, and particularly with the communist countries, where all of a sudden the American embargo was lifted, and American companies were coming in there, thinking that they want to really go hit the big time in Vietnam,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so they'll come back. So many of my friends or whatever, they'll come back and they'll say, "Oh, well, I just signed a deal with them that I have 100% of this particular thing." That's how long were you there? Well, 2 days. And they don't do that in Asia.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
okay, you got it, and somebody else gets it. Okay, you got it too. Everybody gets it. So we don't know. The Chinese could say, "Oh, well, yeah, we're sitting around here. Yes, we'll do that." And the American companies here, if there were without a number of Chinese companies wanting to come here, there'd be some real hard comments going back on that. Just like the Panama Canal, when the Chinese companies were building at least one of the entry and exit points of the Panama Canal, and we said, China,
Yeah. The New York Times pointed out, and rightfully so, I think, that one of the problems is, and Jim, you're alluding to it with Vietnam, is a fundamental market asymmetry between the American economy and the Chinese economy. We're free market. I mean, our corporations, with some vagaries in regulation, are not controlled by our government. There's some exceptions to that, which we don't have time to talk about, but like the Chrysler bailout. But
Pharma,
China, on the other hand, they control everything. They'll support a company as long as they like the company, but the minute they don't like it anymore, they'll just throw all other CEOs in jail and shut the company down. So the whole deal approach to relations with that country is just the wrong. It's just the fundamentally wrong approach because of that asymmetry.
I think we should probably throw more CEOs in jail in this country. Might want to take a note from them on that. but no, I mean, I'm not going to go too far out on a limb on this, but I agree with you in principle, Jeff, that we have a free market economy. But looking at how the regulatory process is generated, I mean, effectively through lobbies these days, it's kind of a mess. Like the bigger companies control. I mean, they crush out market share, and they make the barrier for entry so high for the average guy that it's gotten out of hand.
One of the most profound books about the U.S. economy I've read is a book called Too Big to Fail.
Oh yeah,
by Aaron Sorkin, I think that's his name, New York Times correspondent, and the relationship between the government and Wall Street is unbelievable. Mm-hmm. First of all, it's a revolving door in terms of leadership. You come out of an investment bank, you go work for the government. I mean, so Jim, I that's why I said with certain exceptions. I mean, but there's still an asymmetry,
right?
No doubt about it.
Well, do we want to pivot towards blowing up boats, or we got some more for this?
Well, it's going to be interesting to see in the next 4 or 5 days what really came out of this visit.
Oh yeah,
and what the future in the Middle East is going to be with the way that the Chinese leadership has been working diligently in diplomatic terms in that region, and we're so used to it, and also if you look at Netanyahu saying that the war against Iran is not over. We are arming. We are getting ready to go, and we're going to have to sort that out, or our leadership is going to have to sort that out. But yeah,
real quick on that, Ed.
Yeah.
I think we're going to get a really good look at the intent of this meeting with Trump in China from a Chinese perspective once Putin shows up in a week or two. And I don't like to get in the game of making predictions, but I think there's going to be a very strong theme that they are ascendant and we are old news. And they're gonna probably caricature Trump a bunch in various ways, probably subtle ways, not necessarily cartoon him, but in the sense that I was talking to a guy today who knows a lot about Russian economics and their natural resource trade, but there's apparently a pipeline coming out of Siberia into China that he thinks is going to be one of the major announcements,
Mhm.
which effectively, it's an end around on the blockade in Iran, and would also divert a tremendous amount of natural resources that have been earmarked for Europe permanently into China. And that is, kind of the hailing of a new dawn type of situation.
Well, there's historic precedent for that. The Russians actually were wanting to go all the way to the waterline in East Asia, and the Japanese fought them in 1904
Oh
or
yeah.
something like that,
Right.
and the Japanese
Yeah.
won.
Right.
But yeah, it would be that's not improbable.
Yeah.
You to get it. And another thing is when once this war began, the other countries in Southeast Asia, most of those that have really strong relationships with us over decades and decades, started trying to figure out, okay, what are we going to do now? What are we going to do if they don't go back? There's no real strong feeling out of this Trump administration about us, about East Asia. One of Trump's comments when somebody asked him about Taiwan, I guess several years ago, he said, "Well, China's 50 miles from it, and we're 9,000 miles from it." I mean, no, well, yeah, uh, and so they're going lateral. The countries in Southeast Asia. That's another article that I read on Asia Times the other day was a missile deal. A missile deal that Vietnam and India are looking at, and that's not out of it's a big cruise missile deal that they want to probably work on, and both of them. It's a Russian-made missile. India, during the period when we were trying to control the expansion of the Soviet Union, India was a big ally of the Soviet Union during that period because they were so anti-China.
Mhm.
But you're going to start seeing a lot more of this. I think this missile has been has already been contracted by Philippines too. And they're our valued friend in there. So nothing wrong if they do it laterally and they do it while they're still on our side. So yeah, I wanted to. Oh, we're running out of time. I want to touch on this because I think it's so important. Um, for many serious reasons involving the conduct of our constitutional government and the ramifications of international law, without notifying Congress, Trump approved the killing of what he likes to call narco terrorists. We all know that. Small boats crossing international waters without knowing who they are, what cargo they're carrying, whether they are armed, and where specifically they're going. This initially led many national security leaders, including Admiral William Baumgartner, who is a very competent attorney and former judge advocate general of the Coast Guard, to strongly dispute the legalities of these lethal attacks, as have others after that. And for those of us that have decades of experience in national security and foreign policy, it defies the imagination that our Congress spent a day or two listening to the American supervisors of this illegal, unconstitutional, and frankly immoral conduct, and then shrugged the whole thing off. They brought in one very well respected admiral to talk about the incident where a second run killed two unarmed uh, boat guys, pilots of boats. And then it all went away. They had one, and the members of Congress did not really pursue this more in terms of the the illegality of this. We should not be doing it in that way. They've now killed at least 192
Whoa.
so-called narco-terrorists who were unarmed, whose names we do not know, what they were carrying, though, whose so-called attacks against our country largely amounted to driving speedboats. So what are we going to do with that? How can we do anything about that? And we might want to call Senator Kelly on this too.
Yeah.
Have him talk to Mr. Hegseth.
Well, that your reference to Admiral Kelly brings up a fascinating point about. Let me just personalize this a little bit. When I was in the Navy, I was on a nuclear-powered cruiser, the Mississippi, and before we did our 6-month deployment to the Med, we did a stint down in the Caribbean with a Coast Guard a law enforcement detachment on board, and we pulled over essentially on the high seas in the Caribbean, a boat that had about 6 inches of water line, and we sent the Coast Guard off. They boarded the boat and discovered just 24 tons of marijuana. And what did they do? They seized the marijuana. They seized the crew. We brought the crew on board and we heloed them off. And they were dealt with the way that you deal with people who are smuggling drugs in the United States. You arrest them and you subject them to the criminal justice system. You don't kill them. If my CO had come up to me on the fantail and said, I was the fire control officer on my first tour. He said, I want you to target those people and kill them. I would say, sir, are you out of your mind?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? We're not. What? So now we're in Mark Kelly land. What do you do with an order like that? It's extraordinary. First of all, what is a narco terrorist? I'm still trying to figure that out. Yeah,
that's not a real thing. Like,
it's
okay.
It's a name a way to name somebody who supposedly is bad when they're just trying to get a paycheck to drive a boat, drop something off.
So hypothetically, if this was like the 1930s and the same administration was in place and they had a problem with, say, the mafia, what would they call the Italian mob or the Irish mob in the 1930s? If today they're narco terrorists, would they be like potato terrorists?
Alcohol terrorists.
Yeah. Booze bashers.
Booze, yeah.
Booze boomers.
Boot. Yeah, you got to take bootleg and terrorists and put it together.
Yeah, go moonshine. Moonshine in the Appalachian Mountains.
Yeah.
The revenuers are after you.
There you go. They're all West Virginia terrorists, those guys.
No, Kentucky too.
Yeah, definitely.
One of my great friends had a family who had done that business in the past. He was wounded very badly in Vietnam, but he used to bring me a jar, and I said, will you sell that down to me? He goes, no, it's what I do. It's just somebody comes up and said, can I have some? And I said, you give me, I don't know what you're talking about, but if you give me $60, I can tell you where you can find a jar.
Wise man.
Yeah.
So to your question, Jim, about what do we do about this? Now we're back to the lameness of our Congress.
Absolutely.
Oh man.
I mean, if someone's going to do something about it, it should be the House and Senate Armed Services committees that say you are not going to use the military to kill criminals. You're not. But
if they are criminals,
right, yeah. Let's. What an excellent point.
Yeah.
No due process. I mean, it's frightening. But no. The few Congress people that speak up about it, they're next thing you know, they're being hauled in front of a grand jury, which thankfully in Kelly's case, the grand jury just refused to do anything. God bless them. It's very courageous. But
we ought to talk to Kelly. We ought to empower him. I'm thinking about that we collectively, but
it's a great idea.
Because he was saying the right thing.
Mhm.
So and ironically, I represented pro bono a Marine who had been convicted of second-degree murder in Vietnam, and he was court-martialed and convicted for uh, obeying an illegal order.
Right.
He was 11 days in Vietnam, and private, and this guy went bonkers, and he was going, "What do I do? I'm out here on a killer team, 400 meters away from the lines." And he got convicted because he obeyed an order.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. I'm a fellow at the National Institute for Military Justice, and we have a project called the Orders Project, and that's exactly what its purpose is. It's to create an educational structure for service members, and both enlisted and officers, to be able to deal with that very question. What do I do when I'm asked to do something that I truly believe is illegal?
Yeah. You got to say no.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, anyway, thought we would have a conversation about that. We got a few minutes left, Jim.
Yeah, we got plenty of time. We got as much time as you want.
Yeah. What I was thinking about, I kind of mentioned it to Jeff yesterday, is might be interesting at the end of these podcasts, we can have a sort of like the thing that got you mad this week. Just a couple of minutes. Something that you think was piqued you. Jeff, did you have something? I think you kind of mentioned you did.
There's something that, well, first of all, I just harken back to the conversation you and I had about writing, and I was expressing the view that I want to write more than I have been, and your immediate response, Jim, was, "Well, what makes you angry?" And I thought, "Gosh, where do I begin?" One thing that galls me, and Ted Carter, who is the former superintendent of the Naval Academy, and with whom I dealt, never directly, through his lawyers, always representing countless numbers of midshipmen. After his retirement, became the president of the University of Nebraska, and then from there launched himself to be the president of Ohio State University, the Ohio State University. And he has now been deposed. And the reason he's been deposed is because he had an illicit affair with some blogger. And the Board of Regents, I guess, they commissioned an internal investigation, and it was ugly because of the level of the breach of trust between the president of that, an institution of that magnitude, the breach of trust, the breach of fiduciary duties, it's just pretty extraordinary. So that kind of hypocrisy just infuriates me. I mean, by hypocrisy, I mean the number of, just think about the number of midshipmen he prided himself on having the highest graduate percentage of graduates of the class of 2019, but he still meted out plenty of punishment. And I'm sure was very high-minded and moralistic about it when he did it. And that all, I just, that kind of hypocrisy just infuriates me. So that's my getting jacked up for the week. I'll turn it over to you guys.
Where do I begin?
Why are you mad? Why are you mad?
I could pick a couple different things, but I'll focus on something that came out this morning. I was talking about it with Alex Christoforou on my show about an hour ago. We were just kind of shooting the S back and forth. And so it came out that Trump has made a tremendous amount of money on the stock market.
Shocker.
Not illegal. not illegal because the people who write U.S. code made sure that what they did was not illegal. So go figure, right? But says according to this report, his holdings were relatively the same until the end of March, but Trump is 20% more in profit almost all of his stocks. And then you go down, but he's over 100% in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, at least 12. At least 12 over 100% return on investment. And when we talk about hypocrisy, I think about the master sergeant who was in Delta that bet on the Maduro raid and netted himself $400,000 and they threw the book at him for it. And like, okay, like, I mean, you got to have some kind of conduct when you're in the military, but this guy was not like betting on his team to lose. He just made himself a little bit of a windfall and a win bonus for going in and snatching Maduro. And he was part of the operation. And they absolutely smashed him over 400 grand. And I find the hypocrisy in that to be a little bit over the top. Like, if these guys at the top can make millions and billions of dollars playing the market or using the same predictive Kalshi markets that they're placing bets on whether or not we will bomb Iran or whether or not there'll be a ceasefire or whether or not X will happen, and then turn around also shorting the market on oil because they know it's about to happen. And then you're going to turn around and nail a guy who's making, tens of thousands of dollars a year as a special operations operator and risking his ass in the process. And you're going to smash him. I think that's BS. And that's my outrage for the week, I guess. So other than the fact the Orioles are terrible, they're just a bad baseball team. That's every week.
This is not an outrage, but it's an acute disappointment because I see it over and over again. For a larger reason than a lot of people may think. But there was an incident in here in the Capitol where a Republican woman in Virginia, I think she's an elected official or campaigning, had made a comment or nodded within a comment at an interview, said that Hakeem Jeffries needs to get his cotton picking hands on this and get it done. And on the one hand, I have to say, because everywhere we see this is a racist comment. Okay, and so I can say and I can understand this much, that used the way that it did with a high level member of Congress, you can interpret it that way. With Hakeem Jeffries, and I don't think that was an appropriate thing for her to do. But this whole thing about cotton pickers, cotton picking hands, you see it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Every time we see something that's got cotton pickers in it, they say it's racist. And people, in the Democratic Party, could really benefit if they accept the facts of how the people in the South, the American South, lived, and then they'll see that's completely different. In 1936, the Roosevelt administration had done a whole study on how to improve the economic conditions of the South, white and black. The Southern culture, of which I am, from, it was not a two race society down there. It was three. It was the veneer of the top, which Jeff mentioned in another situation, the veneer of the top of the whites, and then the poor whites and the poor blacks. And the statistics for 1936, whether there were 1.8 million sharecroppers in the South, and 1.2 million of them were white, including my mother. She picked a lot of cotton. My mother picked as much cotton as you could have picked when you're 10 years old. Your dad died. And when my dad met my mother, she was 17 years old. And he said the first thing he noticed about her was her hands felt like the bark off of a tree. And we need to accept the truth that this was not simply a racist thing. It was a thing about the people's conditions and what they had, where there were a lot of poverty on both sides. Uh, and again, one of the reasons I ran as a Democrat for the Senate was that to help straighten this out. You know, the equality of the history of our country. So, please, folks, you know, if you want to, there's a lot more facts on it. Just give me a call or an email. All right.
All right.
Okay.
Perfect.
All right. This is a good.
I like
podcast.
this. Let's keep doing it.
Yeah. Okay, Jim, you can take the rest of the week off.
Yeah, that's never gonna happen.
Let's do
The second I stop moving
in 1 week.
Yeah, karma is hunting me. The second I stop moving, I'm gonna have another kid born. So I got to keep moving.
Oh wow! Yeah. And then have that Iron City beer.
I'm gonna go hunt one of those down. Actually, I found that like it's my local watering hole that I usually avoid because the food's not that great and it's hard to bring the kids in there. But they stock Iron City beer here in Panhandle, Florida, and
wow,
really?
Yeah, not Icy Light.
It's a good beer.
Yeah, not Icy Light, but Iron City, and it is. And I had Erin, my wife, there with me last week. We were sitting there and was explaining the difference between Icy Light and Iron City and you, Dad, with Grandpap. And then also I had to contrast it with another favorite of mine, which is National Bohemian.
Natty Bo.
Well, see, yeah. I mean, so the difference is that the only thing that remains in Baltimore of Natty Bo is that guy's face up on a building. They make it in Milwaukee. Yeah. It is like literally the piss water off the floor. It comes out of old Milwaukee. It is nothing. It is gross. And then you have Iron City is still made in Pittsburgh. It's still there.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Pittsburgh Brewing Company.
Good beer.
Yeah.
How about that?
They haven't sold out or decided to quit yet. I appreciate that. So
okay, guys.
Alrighty.